Thank you so much for coming on this hot day. We have a fantastic talk this afternoon, I hope. I think it's going to be brilliant.
Yeah.
Obviously, we've got to know what the connecting point is here through Jen. From the left, Mr. Greg Taylor, aka Foxtrot Echo, who was in COUM Transmissions. Eric Heist, who produced these wonderful works here with Jen. And Paul Bee Hamsphire, lifelong friend pretty much of Jen's from the early 80s, I believe. Yeah, so a lot of personal insight into the lives of. Yeah?
I hope so, yeah.
So I'm not going to interject at all. I'm going to man the camera. That's my job today. So I think maybe we'll actually be asked a lovely question of Eric upstairs about this work. I think maybe we'll take that as a starting point. If we can ask that one more time, and hopefully the busker, aka Bob Marley, is not going to start outside, because if he does, we'll get crossed. I think I might shut the window a little bit. There's a bit of
that's
extra noise
as well.
Yeah.
So
I just bring it down a little bit. Busker's really bad as well. Absolutely terrible. I think we're good to go.
So when I first got here, the thing that struck me first of all, seeing them in the flesh, was the colours. And I asked you whether that came from you or from Genesis or collab or about them.
Right. Well, the source images all came from Jen. It was about a dozen Polaroids that she gave me about 20 years ago at the end of our first collaboration. So in this second version, we hadn't worked together for a long time. So when we started up again, it was a very different approach. And I was working very sequentially. It was the beginning of COVID. It was this sort of meditation exercise for me in some way. These are a set of 30, 22-inch by 22-inch pieces that are silk screens from an image that was a bit ambiguous. All the images that Jen gave me it was hard to tell what was going on, who they were, what the gender was. And so starting with that image, I made 30 rotating canvases that went through the color wheel, every combination of color between the foreground, the image, and the background. So that was starting of this set of pieces, and then we did, after Jen passed, this piece continued and finished that and then started on some others. So we went up to 33 by 33 inches, a set of 6, 33, 33, a set of 4, 44 by 40. So it was all in the 11s that you're thinking about. That was important.
Yeah, the thing that struck me was, the reason I asked was, apart from the colours being really kind of common, they reminded me of like the Tibetan prayer flags, both with the colour and the canvassing thing as well. And they had that effect of kind of like very calming effect as well. So I was wondering if that was an intentional thing.
Calming, yes. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Trying to find peace in making these pieces, which was very different than the first iteration of Candy Factory.
Yeah. The other thing was that it like in now kind of today's self-obsessed selfie culture, but there's no kind of identity in any of them as well.
Right.
Is that a thing?
I think so. Yeah. When Jen first came to my studio, I was doing these body prints on sugar. Like full body prints, and I was trying to kind of meld with these chat groups, and Jen seemed to, that was kind of a common ground.
Yeah.
We really understood each other through that. And then Jen, silk screen's great, was very interested in Warhol, and that gender confusion.
Yeah.
Not gender confusion, but ambiguity.
What year was it that you kind of decided to do it with?
We met in 1998,
Right.
and it was more commodity-oriented work at that time. We were making candy bags with, rock sugar in them. These large dildo strap paintings that Jen provided all the imagery. And that was always the basis of it, was the imagery that Jen provided.
So do these ones predate the kind of the dawn, like the selfie with Instagram and all that? Or did it come afterwards?
Which, the first one, these?
Yeah, these.
Yeah, these are from 2019, 2020.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't know if anyone else has got any questions to ask. Yeah.
Eric, what was the process like working directly with Jen then for you? How was that on a kind of production basis?
It
For these
was, Jen was really, directed me, but indirectly.
Mm.
Very good at collaborating and leaving things kind of open. And Jen would make suggestions like, maybe we should do a soundtrack, and maybe you should have sex with your wife, and I should, that should be the backdrop sound. And yeah. And Jen would go, that's it. Yeah.
Did the sound thing happen? Did you do sex with
There
other
was.
stuff?
Yeah, and I can't remember what it was, and we were trying to find that, right?
Yeah, there's a copy in the British Library actually.
Yeah.
Isn't there? There's one copy in the British Library, but the Centre of Attention, who hosted that first iteration of the show here in London, don't have a copy of it.
Yeah.
They have a sugar cube, and that's it, I think.
Yeah.
Nothing else.
Well, the first version was presented at a gallery in New York called Team Gallery. And when we went to talk to the director, it was interesting because Jose sat us down in his office and said, I want you to know I am showing Eric Heist because I know him, but you, I do not know. But he did. I mean, he knew him very well. But it's the whole thing about the art world was very resistant, I think, to Jen. And I think Jen was feeling like it was time to start, re-entering the art world in New York, and this was a way to do that.
And that was from that first body of work that you alluded to.
Yes.
Could you say more about that first body of work?
Yeah, there was a big sugar-coated tunnel that you entered through. Little light box images of Fabulous Bob, which was this person. Never met Fabulous Bob. And then you come in, and there were a lot of things that kind of talk about levels of wealth and poverty, desire through this sugar imagery. So there were a lot of things going on. Commodity-oriented objects, mugs with Jen's ass, whipped ass on them. She saw a couple of those left. There was some wild stuff there. Yeah.
Where was your role in that sugar world?
Mine was making the objects, and Jen Jen also was getting things made in Nepal. So there was a rug that had been, I guess, somehow they printed it in Nepal, and there was an embroidered T-shirt with the Candy Factory logo on it that was also made in Nepal.
I think that was Jen's first ever commercial gallery show.
Yeah, right? I mean, yeah.
I think so.
There was the ICA show, and then it was kind of like, gotta go.
Because maybe I should say, I spent quite a bit of time with Jen in New York because we were neighbours in Brooklyn for quite a long time, and I was busy with another artist at the time, but we had always talked about trying to do something together, and this was about 1996, 97, and I wasn't able to do it at the time. So being able to put this on now is, like I said before, is a bit like a kind of fulfillment of a pact in some ways for me to say to Jen, okay, we did it eventually. A little bit late,
Yeah.
sure, but we did it, which you know, I think they appreciate that, which would be nice.
So was it you that actually kickstarted it, or was it Genesis started it?
I think it was Jackie.
Oh, it was Jackie.
Yeah, I think she'd seen my work and she thought Jack would respond to it. So they showed up at the not-for-profit that I was running called Momentum Art, and they, you know, we met there.
Right. And so did you speak, can you remember what you spoke about doing first of all? What it was
The
going to
very
be?
first time.
Did
No.
it materialize, or was
No.
it something that never did?
I think it just started with Jen starting to feed me images.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Polaroids.
Yes. And roll Polaroids. Yeah, and she could do these kind of rituals, you know, and I wasn't aware of what those were or how they happened, but you know, just hand me a bunch of Polaroids and say this is what I did with some people. And I think there was some sort of regularity to her rituals. You know, I think.
And photography was part of the ritual.
Yeah,
Polaroid
I mean,
photography.
I guess that in COUM it was very much about making those rituals public.
Oh yes, I think it's just a continuation of the process all through. It's been developed over time, isn't it, in different aspects? Because what quite fascinates me is the sort of echoes of things perhaps the seeds of which were sort of 40 or 50 years ago, quite possibly. And this slightly reminds me of the bardo, you know. It's like almost on some level that he was sort of aware of where he was going, and it's like sort of that abstract thing just before you go into infinity, if you like, or eternity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's got that sort of connotation
It's
to
the
it.
dissolving of the body, isn't it?
Yeah.
They have like an X-ray field to me. It's like X-rays on LSD or something as well. It's like colourful X-ray. And you're seeing what's behind the work as well, because normally Jen's work, in my mind, it's right in your face. So I kind of like that negative, you know, X-ray quality to it as well. It isn't calming, isn't it? A lot more so than most of a lot of Jen's work. Before you started work with Jen, what was your? Did you kind of know him through the music, and did you like it?
Yes, I saw Psychic TV perform in Philadelphia, I guess, the first time.
How old were you then? Were you kind of?
In the early 20s.
Right. So that would have been with Psychic TV, because there's so many different.
They came out. They came out in such a cloud of smoke you couldn't see them. It didn't go on for quite a while before they came out with the sound going.
You know, we have a member of Psychic TV here today.
Oh yeah.
Because they put their hand up. Yes.
Did you perform in Philadelphia?
No, it's in the mid-1980s lineup that had Hilmar on horns and Monty Casaza.
Yes.
And Mouse, Drew McDowell and Rose McDowell.
Yeah.
But I never made it to America. We did do a big European tour that year.
I saw him performing at Roseland too in New York, and it was incredible because they played I think for 4 or 5 hours, and by the end of it, everybody was on stage. And it was kind of like a rave. Jen was so good at kind of uniting everybody, making everybody really feel a part of something.
You met Jen like long before that, though, didn't you? Didn't you meet Jen?
I was involved in putting on the prostitution exhibition at the ICA. I mean, I was just a general arty dog's body.
Right.
In the days when you could be that, you didn't have to have some sort of master's degree in curation to be allowed to be set free on the yard.
Yeah.
I just did whatever was needed. So I was putting gigs on in the theatre, people like Clash, or taking tickets at cinema, or helping to put on exhibitions. So I met Jan and Cozy at the press night.
The what, sorry?
The sort of press night, you know, the
Oh,
open
right.
night, the private view for
Of the ICA,
prostitution.
the prostitution thing.
Yeah, yeah. Which and you know, the ended up with the infamous declarations by Nicholas Fairbairn that these people are the wreckers of civilization. And then what we did was, I mean, it's still documented, I know, so probably most people will know. But what we did was, as all the outrage newspapers were published, so day by day, it was just more and more, you know, Cozy striptease troupe on Arts Council money, blah blah blah, you know, public funds on porn, etc. etc. As all these newspapers came in day after day, we just cut them all out and put them up on the wall. So the exhibition grew and grew and grew. So that all the responses
So they were adding to it.
Yeah, the responses
They were
became
feeding
part.
back into it.
Yeah, it became part of the art, you know. Yeah. So that was the first meeting. Yeah, just yesterday. And then I did a single with Jan in 1980.
Well, that was on Industrial Records,
Yeah, I
wasn't it?
confess.
Was that the first one?
Um,
Was that the first Industrial Record?
no, it was about number 12 or
Was
13,
it?
but yeah, it was at the time that Jan was actually getting a bit. I mean, this was a very, very cheesy pop tune. So the reason Jan wanted to do it was the first thing that he did with Alex Ferguson. He, they, she. Sorry, I switched back. I asked Jen about pronouns, and they said, "You've got no, I don't care." That's the whole thing about that.
Yeah, so that's why I believe too.
So yeah, you know, so the thing about I Confess is it was the first collaboration between Alex Ferguson and Jan, the first, you know, tuneful pop tune, and so Throbbing Gristle were still going, but they were in a process of dissolution because by then Chris and Cozy were already together.
Yeah.
But the official end of TG actually came a year later, I think 1981, when the mission is terminated, postcards all got kind of sent out. But things were, you know, really well and truly done for by then.
Were they? Was it really tense overall at that time? You know, like with that relationship.
Yeah, it's funny, people have asked me that. People have asked me, you know, after Cozy's book came out. Yeah, people have asked, you know, what I thought about Cozy's account of things, and all I can say is I didn't witness anything, which doesn't mean I don't believe that things happen, you know. But yeah, you know, who knows what happens between people behind closed doors, etc., etc. But personally, I was just a sort of shoulder to cry on. I mean, Jen was very upset about, you know, Jen saw it as a complete and total infidelity because it was an emotional infidelity. What, you know, to fall in love
those
with.
rules were very weird at that time.
Weird
There
rules,
were rules,
but
weren't
the
there?
rules were have sex with anybody, but to fall in love with another member of Throbbing Gristle, as far as Jen was concerned, was an absolute betrayal. So that was the point of view from Jen at the time, and Jen was very, you know, heartbroken and cross about that, but looking to do something else. Hence, Alex Ferguson being brought in and the writing of all these quite pretty and tuneful songs.
Yeah, because there was the Elizabeth Welch one, wasn't there? The Stormy Weather.
Yes, yeah, well that's from the Derek Jarman film.
Yeah, so lovely.
Yeah.
I was just thinking that we've got the complete arc of the Jen and Cozy with you right at the beginning.
Oh yeah.
You're
We've got
right
a
from
complete
Hull,
arc
aren't
of the relationship between
Oh well, yeah,
Jen
it's
and
very
Cozy. She was
how
at
it
the beginning.
emerged just over the because it was interesting. Well, I saw obviously we were very close in Hull, and those we were very close unit, almost in love in a way. It was because when you find people that are you've got this really sort of if you want to challenge things in a big way, you find yourself quite isolated, especially in something a provincial place like Hull. So we were very sort of, we had these ideas we wanted to change things like that. So there was a very strong emotional connotation, you know, it draws everybody together in the project as well. So, and they were very close, but I have to say, and I could always get in trouble for this, but I always think that Cozy as well as an individual was quite, she's got quite more than one side to her. And she can be incredibly charming and loving and everything, but also sometimes she can be you know, quite sort of had quite a fierce temper. You know, she could be very, and Jen's always represented as the one that's, you know, sort of, you know, the aggressive personality. But I can tell you, I witnessed things where it was a bit more complicated, and as you say, that's the nature of life, isn't it? But everything tends to get characterised in extreme ways, and that seems to be the current narrative. You know, I wouldn't be here if I didn't think there was more to the whole, you know, story, if you like. You know? So that is, you know, that's something to be thought about, isn't it? And the more people can sort of discuss, you know, you know, give their testament, and the more it's going to get more and more accurate picture, perhaps. You know.
I just feel quite confused by Cozy and Chris getting back together with Jen to relaunch Something Crystal. In the light of this narrative
So it's
of if I don't
contradiction in a
know,
way, in
maybe
some
it
ways.
isn't like, I mean, it's
it's
just a
sad
really
to
confusing
say,
thing, isn't
me
it?
too. I wasn't
Because I
there,
suppose,
so I
yeah,
can't comment
exactly.
as well.
It's tough. To me, it seems odd that you would go back to working side by side with someone that you considered to be abusive. But then
But
when I spoke to other people about that, they said, well, maybe she was at the point where she felt that she'd moved on and was feeling completely, you know, fine about it. I don't know. I think it is very muddled.
It is, isn't it? And I think it's that thing that people change. I mean, in the time that I've known Jen, which was since like 81, 82, until, in my view, there were so many different Jens along that timeline. Because I have friends that still won't speak to Genesis now because of some little fucking thing that happened years ago. And I'm like, and they didn't, and I said to them, now, you know, you missed out. Because one little thing that happened in the 80s where maybe you weren't credited on something or something like that, and then, you know, you demonized Jen, you missed out on all these later kind of, it's a bit like Doctor Who, he just like suddenly comes in and it's like this different person, but there's a thread that ran through it all, which was, you know, intrinsically Jen, but the way it was very Doctor Who-like, because the personalities that would become attached to that were so polar opposites, and I kind of am I like to be very fluid in most things I do. So, for example, when the first split was Tibet and Jen and Psychic TV, and I was friends with Tibet before I knew of Psychic TV, so I managed to navigate being friends with them both, and then when Sleazy and Jeff left, the same thing, I managed to stay friends with both camps. Very few people did. I think you did, John Gosling did, but very few people did. And I'm so glad that I never, you know, went one way or the other, because I would have missed out on, especially Jen in the later years when it became such a complete character change, really. Much kind of warmer and loving and funny, and he'd lost all of that kind of almost macho skinheady vibe in the early 80s that he had. I mean that was the thing that came in. Yeah, he was.
You talking about
Was
the
it like
old
the
days
skinhead
when I used to hit
phase?
somebody, you know?
Yeah. I don't know what he was
Can't
like
imagine
before
that.
that, but there was this tough, I'm a real, his catchphrase was, I'm a real man. And he'd be like, and he'd strut around in his like tight skinhead trousers and big boots with his, and he'd be, oh, and he wasn't big, he'd give this thing a bit totally tough.
Well, because Jen used to wear bother boots in the 1970s, and of course there was, when we were in Hull, there was quite a relationship with the skinheads and people like that, and they liked COUM. Because they're very sort of, and Jen was quite, as we know, a very strong character, and they respected him for, although he was completely weird in a way, the fact that he was so, what's my word, I suppose, authentic in a way, you know, he was really sort of, well, he was very engaging, we all know that, anybody who knew him, he drew you in, he could be very intense, so he could charm the beast as well, couldn't he? So, but he had this thing with the Hells Angels, famously, as well in Hull as well. So there was this other side, you know. He also liked to flirt with it slightly, you know. It's like riding, like surfing or riding the beast or something. You know, that was And that's what makes him very, he, she, I don't know whatever definition we would currently go with. But yeah, it was, if I talk in the past tense, it probably is he. But, you know, that was something that was very, you know, part of his complexity of his character, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Was it like that from day one when you met him first time?
Well, it was sort of, when we met, the first thing, he just completely, what's the word? He was very sort of relaxed and very sort of, I mean, and it was sort of a funny thing to say, but he had a very domestic side. Did you know that?
Yeah.
But everybody finds it because he liked to present himself as, you know, like Alistair Crowley, the heir, you know, the beast. And he used to like to have his tea at 4 o'clock. Which people found really very disconcerting, and they didn't see. And he used to talk to people, and it was like a character out of Coronation Street sometimes, because he had a Manchester accent. So he could talk to people on all sorts of levels. Then he might come out with all the cosmic stuff or whatever, the mind-blowing stuff. And I have to say, but he liked to confuse. If there's one thing you can really say about him, that was his. Well, that's what we all like to do in a way. That was part of the, you know, that was the banner. That was the thing we aspired to. You know, always confused.
How did you first meet? How did you first meet, Greg?
Oh, how did we meet? Oh,
yeah.
Well, I was an art student. See, and that's another thing. It's not always like to read. It's not always mentioned that there was somebody in the group with a formal art background. No, it was all they all just grew out of them. But yeah, I was at art school in Bradford because I did light shows in the 1960s, and I was doing visual video, trying to do video art, and it's very difficult getting the resources. You know, it was incredibly expensive. You know, to get just a black and white video, it cost you equivalent of about £16,000 in today's money. So I happened to be in Bradford, sort of hanging on to this course where I seemed to know more than the lecturers. Very 1960s, 70s. You ask a technical question and they say, "Well, what are you doing? Can you explain to me?" Anyway, so there was this concert, this benefit concert put on at for some people that had been busted or something in Halifax. But it was arranged by Jeff Nuttall, you know, and he compared it. And they volunteered to perform. I didn't know anything about them, and it was awkward at the top of the bill, you know. So I went along, and most of the bands were like 12 bars, very dreary sort of stuff, you know. And then this group came, and it was totally out, it was fantastic, you know. There was a massive drum kit with a sunshade over it, and there was a dog head running around the stage, and this glamorous schoolgirl with really long legs, you know, in a schoolgirl outfit. And these people, they're all wearing these orange PVC capes, you know. And it started, you know, this is after a sort of really dreary blues band, you can imagine. And anyway, of course, I think it was, you know, they went to the stuff of a bit like, how do you describe it? Something like Captain Beefheart, you know. It was really out there stuff. And at one point, they were knocking ping pong balls into the audience, and they all had numbers on apparently, a bit like the lottery. And Spidey, who was in the group at the time, Spidey Gasmental, apparently he got concussed because I think Jen was lifting up the cricket bat, went like that bang, and he was staggering around. And the audience really got sort of really annoyed with them, as you can imagine. And they were chanting off, and Jen was leading them in the chant. So I went up afterwards and I thought, I think you're fantastic. I said, perhaps we can get you on at the college, and that's how it started, you know. And we did, and when the time where I did get them on the college, inverted commas, it was just a tiny little. It was in the Afro West Indian Club, a really big venue, and it was only Jen and Cozy and the dog, because everybody else, the first edition of the group, dispersed. You know, I didn't actually meet Spider Gasman until the exhibition 5 years later. So it was, you know, and so we started, and Jen bombards you if once you made a contact with it. Did he do it with you? Yeah, he bombarded you with letters. Yeah, read your whatever.
Once in a while, like.
Yeah, no, it's interesting.
Sometimes it was hard to.
And then you get postcards, you get free gifts, drawings.
Yes, I had everyone else.
So I started writing back, you know, oh, that's a great idea. And he said, He said, right, I started suggesting ideas. Why don't you know, it would be a good idea if you did that? So he said, well, why don't you join the group? Because that happened. So now you know.
My brother joined the group. He used to all the time, didn't he? Join the group, join the group. He was always doing that. My band that I was in, Getting the Feel, we got a big record deal with RCA. And that week, Jen sent out a press release to Sounds saying that I was in Psychic TV. And they turned up and they were like, we've just given you this big advance that you're in Psychic TV. And I'm like, no. And he was always like, come and join the group. Yeah, I love that.
No, there was always that's another thing. I've got a whole suitcase full of letters from Genesis and COUM, mainly from Jen, of course, you know. And it's extraordinary. He used to write everything out in hand with me before he started learning.
Was he still doing his language? Was it still in butter instead of bars?
In some of it's in multicolours and things. And it wouldn't be just one page, it might be a couple of pages. I think he must have spent at least 12 hours a day, because he wrote to not just me, but obviously he was writing to anybody that might give us a gig, the Arts Council, whoever it might be. It was a whole a plethora of various.
Interesting working methods to Jen saying, yeah, I tried at one point. I thought I could get so much more done if I just ran everywhere. It worked for a little while and then I collapsed. And then my ex-wife and I ran it from Jen and Jackie on Gates Avenue. We were near like Lynn, sure, take me downstairs to the apartment where her mother had been. So all these crutches and things in the apartment. It was free anyway. But we couldn't stay there because every night you'd hear high-heeled shoes running back and forth all night long, chasing each other. It didn't last very long.
All the details, yeah.
Hello.
Can I ask about the title of the show? It's a project.
The Candy Factory was
Yes.
something
The factory,
that Jen coined for the beginning of the first one. It was around 2000.
I read that factory relates to factory records in some way.
Yes, and the factory, World's Factory.
What in what way does it relate?
To factory
Factory,
records?
yeah, factory.
Well, that was just because that was Jen's connection to industrial music.
And what about the connection to Warhol? Because you brought the Polaroid Warhol. How much consciousness was there of Warhol's factory? And
Jen was on that very quickly. Yeah, Sandy Darling, and the factory. I think Warhol's interest in sort of getting outside of himself all the time was very attractive to Jen. Like with the Androgyny project, when they were becoming each other through surgery, Jen told me that it was about getting away from himself as much as you can. So Jen was really about destroying identity, I think.
Yeah, I mean, Warhol, we were all very much into Andy Warhol back in the day. I think it was a real inspiration, wasn't it? How the factory worked and things. And I remember Candy Darling, we all talked about Candy Darling. I had a pin-up of her on the wall. So I did. And that would have been sort of 72, 71 or something. So he liked to go back to certain themes as well, didn't he? Over time, certain things, over many years, he sort of come in a cyclical sort of way and readdress.
Right, and then I think Jen was starting another project called Breaking Sex, which I'm not quite clear on what she was at that. It was another way of kind of getting away from yourself.
I think that the Velvet Underground album is one of the big markers that changed Jen's course in his life as well. There was some big exam to him. Instead of doing that, if I remember rightly, he went and picked up his record that he'd ordered by the Velvet Underground. He was so flunked the exam, so his life took a different path. I think they were very kind of pivotal for him.
I was waving my hand for another reason, actually. So let's find another question, shall we? Sorry to go back to early times. Could you just describe a happening that you were involved
One of our performers,
Yeah.
the decompositions, because that's how Jen described them. Yeah, well, it depends, because as I said, they vary quite a lot. Some of them were sort of theatrical. One of them was, I like to quote, is the one, probably my first actually, really, at Canterbury University, University of Kent, Canterbury. And a friend of mine was actually there as a student, and he thought, oh, well, they'll put us on it. And he did the publicity so well that we got banned from the university before we got there. We couldn't perform in the actual main any of the buildings. So the student union and the students, they hired a circus tent or a tent, and they put it on the outskirts of the place, you know, and couldn't get any electricity that far out. So we don't know who did it, but somebody took one of the panels off of one of the street lights and wired up into the national, the national lighting, the local lighting, the town lighting system. And something obviously went wrong with it, and it sort of, after 2/3 of the way through the performance, it blew everything. So we were in the dark. But we improvised around that with the audience, being in the dark. But yes, before that, he did a sort of Jen had this idea of doing a thing about the end of the world, which is very prescient now, the environmental crisis. He dressed as a baby with a big pair of nappies, and there was all sorts of weird things, and it was all very anarchistic, obviously. And there was also Lely, who's Reverend Cheesewire Moore. I don't know if you've heard about him. But he liked to impersonate a vicar. So he used to go up to people in the street and give them a card saying, Jesus commands you to love one another. And then but he also happened to be a burglar. And some of the equipment we used or whatever, like the typewriter that Jen learned to type on, was actually stolen. And but he was a really good musician and a great performer as well. And so he was the only one that could actually play music. We had this sort of rule, if you could play the instrument, you weren't allowed to play it. That was another one of the certain rather perverse approaches we had about stuff. And I remember playing the drums at one point or something, doing some sort of charts. And if the audience reacted in a certain way, you built a sort of scene around them. It was called Copyright Breaches. That was each decomposition we gave a title to. So some of the ones in the back of the book, Records of Civilization, were pretty extensive, I think. But some of them were just 2 people, or 3 of us in a room or something. But this was more like a conventional performance, And I think it went on for about an hour and a half, and there was about 5 or 6 of us involved, and somebody can't remember, but it was a lot what happened around things. And in a way that it was interesting about the news event, as you were saying. We rather like that, and we got into all the local newspapers. Great, another scandal. These people are taking, the money. It was again that same sort of thing. It was one of the first times we probably created it. But I could probably go on for ages to remember all the details. But it was also. I probably described it somewhere before. I always think of us like a gang, and it was like something. It was like a bank robbery, or if you pulled off something and you came away with something worth having, it was worth doing. So I think that was part of the excitement. Sometimes it could be really, people didn't like it at all, really. We had to really, sort of escape very quickly, But, I don't know if that gives you a sort of idea, but that was one. But some of them might be just something very, very. The opposite, it could be quite different. It might be a static gallery or something in it. But we could go through the back or the list of them, and you could respond to that.
What about the PTV years? There was seems to have been a dearth of visual art from Jen. Was that because really it was concentrating on other things
well,
like
there were the films.
Temple of Psychic Youth?
That's all the films.
True, with
Maybe
Derek.
Yeah, and with John
Derek Jarman.
Mabry. So I think that's
True.
where the visual. Would you say that's where
It was always making the collages, I think.
Yeah, to me it was almost like a lot of that time, the stuff he was doing, his own stuff, rather than bringing in people, collabs, it was almost more documenting as well. And so one can wonder whether the reason for it was more what he was doing, and then he was documenting it rather than thinking I need to create art. So it was the physical and spiritual stuff he was doing, really. But then he did what he always did, and what was brilliant in the way that kind of Warhol and COUM was bringing people in and seeing things in people like John Mabry. I mean, he worked with John Mabry, who went on to become a massive film producer, did like Francis Bacon movie and all that. Jen was working with him, and Catherine Evans, when they were like just kids, and Lee Bowery before, when he was just doing stuff in clubs, Jen put Lee Bowery in psychic TV stuff. Before, I mean, he was doing stuff with The Fall and Michael Clark, but with Lee Bowery, and so
Lee Bowery.
yeah. So that was one of Jen's really master things, is to see this, recognize something, and then collab with it. Yeah. Forgot what the question was now.
That visual. John was asking about whether the visual arts were put aside during the PTV years, but I think it's just.
Yeah, they were the main thing, I would say. I think. Yeah.
That's what you mean by. I mean, it's. For example, when we did the Fabulous Feast of Flowering Night, which the process played in that.
Yeah, we did that.
So that was an all-day event, which we would now call. I mean, if you, in Jeremy Deller sort of terms, that would be a piece of art. To create an event all day that had spoken word film.
Yeah.
And then we had Kathy Acker reading. We had films by Derek Jarman, films by John Mabry. We had the Mantis Dance Company with the soundtrack by Psychic TV, The Mouth of the Night, and the set by Derek Jarman, and then various bands, and so it's a kind of all-day happening. But basically, you could easily frame as a piece of art in its own right, rather than
you couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I mean, looking back on that, I'd forgotten about it, and someone posted a flag. I'm like, we did that. It was crazy.
Oh. Björk's first appearance.
Yeah, Coco, before the Sugar Cubes.
Yeah, with Einar and Björk.
Yeah.
So quite a lineup, really.
Yeah.
Of people who are not just, musicians, but people
from
who are
everything, wasn't it? Yeah.
all art forms, really. So as the Arts Council would now call it, a kind of collaborative arts, combined arts, cross art form, multidisciplinary piece of art.
Yeah.
We just call it a gig.
There's a question on the other side of the room.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, obviously you came out this way of bringing people in to say something TV and something protected from the group, but then with those collaborations, how would those collaborations end? Was it usually, how's the split kind of manifested? Was it generally to meet other people and say you want to group anymore, or was it collaborating to fallouts? I guess one of the reason it ended, but I guess how did Jen let people go?
Probably in every way you could think of. Sometimes it was like, we're still mates. Sometimes it was, I'm going to wipe your faces here, whatever. Depends on people's behaviours and what mood people were in and what happened. And some people get very precious about what they did. I never, with any of my stuff that I put forward with them, which was just some like design stuff and that, I didn't care if they went and used it on stuff, because I realised I got so much back in return. But then other people didn't think that too, and you get people that maybe composed a bit of a song that is still griping like 30, 40 years later, spreading hate and stuff. But they should just let that go. I feel it's
But for someone who's so sensitive like Genesis, you think that would bother them?
It did, it would, very much so.
Yeah.
But it's like if you apply the same principle to like Warhol or McLaren and stuff, it's like there's someone at the front of it all, and it could be, you can either view it that they're using everyone to promote themselves, or they're creating this amazing artworks and things that will just carry on. And
Jen was a catalyst. You know, all these things would become activated, and she would send these seeds out, and sometimes they come back.
And check up on them as well, wouldn't you?
Or they seem to always come back.
Yeah, I'd get things from Jen, like, because when Jen was writing the book and I'm working on the book, and he would say to me when I visited him, like, where's your fucking book? Why haven't you finished your fucking book? And I would be like, yeah, where's your fucking book? Why haven't you finished your book? So we just finished, but then he finished it. So. But he would, he'd follow up on stuff, even if he wasn't involved with it. Like my stuff, he's got no involvement, but he would still, follow up on it as well.
I think with my lineup of psychic TV, it did end kind of acrimoniously. I mean, Monty ran away rather than have a fight, so to avoid conflict, he disappeared back to America. And Hilmar and I got sacked. And Hilmar never spoke to Jen again, but I kind of made it up a few months later, so we had a very different approach to it all. And years later, actually, I did put something on social media. I said something about the day I was sacked from Psychic TV. Immediately got a message from Jen. I did not sack you. What do you mean?
Is that when you went to Iceland together? You all went over there. Did you go on that trip?
I went on. No, I didn't. I didn't go. I didn't go on the trip with.
Where they got married again, didn't they? Jen and Paul got married.
Yeah.
With Hilmar, didn't he, Matt?
Hilmar did a pagan wedding. Yeah. No, I didn't go on that one. I have been to Iceland, but on different occasions. Yeah.
Are you still in touch with Hilmar?
I am. Yeah.
Right, he's lovely. So he still, they never made it up?
Never. He never wanted to ever speak to Jen ever again. Yeah, so that's just quite. And I saw Drew McDowell recently.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. Drew was around in the mid.
It was in the same,
wasn't
same
it?
lineup. I mean, I feel quite. I feel it's quite. Drew was never listed officially as a member of Psychic TV because what he did at the time was provide all the kind of tapes. All these cassette tapes that had labels like Howling Wolves, Church Bells, whatever. Yeah. And so Drew manipulated all of these. I mean, now we see that as a completely valid sort of musical, sampling and creating things in this sort of musical kind of way. But it would. I think at the time he was seen more as a kind of just a technician who happened to be, with the band. But I would see him as very much helping to create the musical sound.
And why were you fired then? What happened?
We'd just been on a European tour and Hilmar and Jen were just not getting on, and I think Jen just saw. Well, in fact, Jen said afterwards that he says it's not you, it's just Hilmar, and you're under his influence. Is more or less saw Hilmar as kind of controlling me somehow.
Yeah.
So very many years ago.
I know that's the thing. I'm saying. I mean, Jen could be a fucker. He could. I'm not saying that he couldn't, but at the same time, there was so much amazing things that he wasn't an easy person. But I mean, artists generally aren't. Sorry, not artists. But it comes with the territory, isn't it? I mean, it really does. You get all the emotional people are like that.
So I have one more question.
Sure.
Dorothy, did you know Damon he was living in Brighton?
Yes, we had children. We had children of a similar age. Yeah.
What was his relationship to Brighton? Because obviously he had the campaign to bring dolphins to the dolphin area.
Yeah, I think they were quite settled. They lived. We live on Ditchling Road, and they're just around the corner in Round Hill. For a while they had. Well, my children went to the Steiner School, and Genesis Breyer also went to the Steiner School for a while. then I found this quite funny actually. Jen took them out because he was complaining about the Christianity, and it's like, does it take too much investigation into Rudolf Steiner philosophy to see there is a Christian base to it, you know, but didn't want them to be taught anything about Christianity, so pulled them out of the Steiner school. I think they were, you know, I think if it hadn't been for the dispatches programme and the scandal and the threat of their children being taken away from them, I think they quite likely would have just stayed. Who knows? They might still be a couple and still be living in Brighton, but I don't know. Who knows? But yeah, the dispatches programme, which probably everybody here knows about, but basically they were accused in a Channel 4 of satanic child abuse, and as the parents of 2 young children, they felt they had to leave the country immediately, and then Scotland Yard raided the house in Brighton, and lots of stuff went. Yeah,
And is it still with Scotland Yard?
yeah.
Oh,
Because
that returned it.
It did.
Well, they
I
returned
think
it, but not
parents-
everything.
No,
According
not
to Paula, they got a lot of it back, but not everything.
Yeah.
And they took I mean, crazy things that they, if they looked at, they should have returned. Like when Genesis was born, she was born at home in London, and we filmed it, and it was with the proper midwives and everything. In fact, there was just a few of us in the room, and I videoed it, so we had, Genesis being born, and that was in there, and they never returned that. So that was last picture.
Well, most of the family photographs.
Yeah.
So I mean, any time anybody posts anything that's got any of the kids in, Paula, who's now called Laura, always says, "Oh my God, I have not seen that one before." And Jeanette is always saying that she's got very few photos of her childhood because that stuff just went off in vaults somewhere. And original tapes from industrial records, loads of stuff. Yeah.
I've seen some of the material, but the stuff I've seen has been quite sort of straightforward, sort of not administrative stuff, but talking about or arranging things from the past, in our period. So obviously from as far as, because I forget his name at the moment, sorry about that, but he was a guy that was going to be writing a biography of him back at the time, and he photographed a lot of the stuff in the files before the police raid.
Oh really? Before the raid?
So there's actually some of that exists in another file, so I don't know which things did survive.
And some went to the tape as well. The tapes have got an archive of materials as well. So there is stuff floating around. Yeah.
I've got a question for you. I don't know. We're turning it around. Is that I've often wondered this, because they lived in Round Hill Crescent.
Yeah.
Now, do you think Genesis made a definite decision to live in that place, or was it just chance? Because why I say this is because obviously Alistair Crowley was cremated in the Woodville Cemetery at the bottom of Round Hill Crescent. Yeah. And I don't sometimes see this synchronicity, but in a way, so for Jen, I wondered if he actually chose that he already knew.
Oh, I don't know the answer to that, I'm afraid, but it's an interesting question.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? I mean,
Laura might know.
Yeah, because apparently there was only about 6 or 7 people at Alistair Crowley's funeral, wasn't there? And he was, of course, he died in Hastings, but they wouldn't cremate him over there, so they had to do it over here. So there's interesting sort of connections, aren't there? Isn't it? Oh, so
yeah, but sadly I don't know.
Yeah, I just wondered if there's something else.
That's right. I mean, I think
Tiny little side note there with some of Jen's past and Alistair Crowley as well. In the mid-90s in New York, I was doing this exhibition with Jamie Reed, who was going all the way up over the Sex Pistols, and Jamie and Jen spent a fair bit of time together then, which was lovely to see them two together. But Jamie's great uncle George Watson McGregor Reed, was the chosen chief of the Druid Order for many years, but had also been a member of the Golden Dawn pre-Crowley, and then when Crowley was there as well. In fact, Jamie still has the name McGregor, which was conveyed on George by Samuel Mathers, who ran the Golden Dawn at the time. And Jamie tells a story of his mum and dad actually bumping into Crowley as a very old man in a lift somewhere, and they all knew who the other was, and Crowley apparently pointing a very withered finger at Jamie's mum and saying, "You know the truth, my dear," like that, which they all found extremely creepy. For some reason, I have no idea why. But there was it's a funny crossover actually with the worlds here, because we mentioned McLaren earlier on, and actually McLaren had a ring which he claimed was from Crowley, which actually he said he found down the side of someone's sofa. Who was it? Someone from Led Zeppelin, anyway. But yeah, there's a funny crossover with the two worlds. I mean, often you don't think of the kind of the Pistols thing and the TG world in any shape or form being connected, but there were all sorts of
and also
funny
Peter
things.
Starks and Swayze took the first.
That's
photo,
right.
didn't it?
You did indeed.
Who Malcolm thought were too gay.
That's right. That's right.
He made them look like
Yeah, that's right.
So it actually wasn't Crowley's ring?
Well, I think Malcolm might have embroidered that story a little bit.
Because I've got a little bit of a story.
Go on then, tell us.
I had to go up to Birmingham. I was living in London at the time. I used to work for a merchandising company, because Malcolm had asked the merchandising company to get the ring reproduced.
Okay.
So I had to go up and get the ring and bring it back, because the company who they sent it to refused to do it because of the Crowley connection. And I put it on.
What happened?
No, I was very sick. Like for about 4 hours.
Isn't that interesting?
It is.
Isn't that interesting? You know, before we mentioned David Tibet has quite a lot of Crowley's paintings, and last time I saw him, he was saying he'd suffered from terrible headaches for a long time, which he attributed to the paintings.
to Crowley's paintings.
Still kept them. of
Yeah.
course. Rather put up with headaches and get rid of the paintings.
Can I ask you something? From what you did in COUM or COUM or however you like to pronounce it, well, I'll ask you in a second how you like to pronounce it or did then, but the turn from COUM and COUM and what you were doing then with the theatres very much kind of merges with the spirit of the age, and not to be in any way detrimental about being hippies, because hippies were a great thing, I think, but it was a turn of that social utopian thing about challenging people and their behaviour.
Oh, yeah.
And so how did COUM and you and people around react to TG? Because TG had a definite darkness, and one feels that all the other members of TG definitely had their contribution, but there's a distinction, isn't there, between early TG and COUM, and COUM is very socially enlivening and positive and challenging, and it's about that period where there was lots of squats and street theatre and a kind of thing where teachers and drama groups wanted to go out into society and work with kids and adults and change society.
Yeah.
But TG came at it from quite a dark place from quite early on. And how did people in COUM and COUM react to that dark turn, and how did that come about?
It was like two strands, sort of as it sort of emerged. I mean, to be honest, at the end of COUM, I wasn't so on board with some of the ideas, because it was getting very dark, and even on a personal level, you started to feel quite uncomfortable. And to be honest, at that point, I felt I needed to. I was a young man. I needed to have my own life, a bit more, not wholesome. That sounds terribly boring, doesn't it? Something a bit more life affirming.
Yeah.
They seemed to be going down a slightly darker pathway at that time. And I freely admit, I introduced lots of the Nazi stuff into COUM originally, you know, and but we used it in a sort of, well, I wouldn't say theatrical way, but and also it's always very, that thing is very the Nazi sort of story, if you like. It's very sort of tantalising, quite sort of it's quite a powerful image, and it certainly was to people of that generation. It, you know, if you wanted to introduce something that people would respond
Really
mostly
upsetting.
to or whatever, so you could characterise, if you like, evil or something that was the dark side of things by having that sort of character. So that got reincorporated into TG, didn't it? I mean, and Jen actually mentioned that I was guilty of starting it all off originally, because I had this character called Martin Bormann, which again ties in with the newspaper thing, because we got very interested, because what was happening, I'm slightly digressing here, but I hope you'll bear with me. There was, in the newspapers, as they do now, they make a drama out of every situation. So people kept being found in the South American jungle that were Martin Bormann. Martin Bormann found in jungle. That's very, hence the post we put up on the Instagram. You know, and so I got those two posters at the time, because they only lasted probably a couple of hours before there was another edition, there'd be another headline. So that in itself was quite interesting. And so the drop of a hat could actually draw you into a whole narrative, and you might believe it yourself and think, no, actually, I don't think that was. But as you say, with the throbbing gristle thing, that involved Chris Carter. And we actually wanted to do throbbing gristle-like stuff for about 3 or 4 years before, and Jen thought of the name. Well, this is another issue, because where he got the name from, in the various books. So I was there, so I'm a witness of one. Probably Cozy would say, but she remembers it slightly differently. But in Throbbing Gristle, it says in one of the books that it's North it's old slang for you know, having a hard on or you know, in a way it was like COUM, like the symbol of COUM or COUM. Yeah. It was sort of related. Jen loved it, loved the idea of the name, and he was waiting to form the group, you know. But we felt at the time it needed to have something more. We wanted to do electronic sound and noise. And as I said about the video thing earlier on, of course the equipment was so incredibly expensive to get what you wanted to do. Yeah. And what made Throbbing Gristle possible really was Chris Carter, because he had the technological know-how. And I was sort of involved in that, because I worked with Bruce Lacey. I was an Indian in Hyde Park for 2 weeks. That's another story. And so through Bruce Lacey, I got to know his son, John Lacey, and I said, why don't you join COUM? Well, his best friend, of course, was Chris Carter. And so, and Cozy admits herself that she and Chris wouldn't be together if I hadn't been involved. I was in that. It was a really fascinating pathway, how one thing leads to another. And it was sort of, Throbbing Gristle was preordained, really. It became a moment, and once he could make all these amazing things, and that gave it that sort of oomph. Yeah. And I think also Throbbing Gristle, it was so difficult in COUM, because we were so diverse and made a deliberate point of doing things so, you know, being, you know, changing everything all the time. Sometimes it'd be postal art, another time it would be something full on assault, really aggressive. Another time you'd want to change and do something that surprised people. So the audience never could get a handle on it. But the thing with Throbbing Gristle, it was very focused within the notion of the music business. So you had all the music press, you suddenly got coverage. It was the punk thing, it was happening at that time, so they saw it as an outrageous. So it suddenly got a lot of attention, but it had to be restricted to quite a narrow window of what you could do, wasn't it? It was still that you had albums, you didn't start going off at a tangent or being, you know, so that's why I think how it worked.
A couple of things. So you mentioned, did you dress as Martin Bormann as a Nazi for some of the performances?
Of course.
But that's very interesting. That's brilliant.
Don't want to miss that opportunity.
So I've got a little alternative theatre guide. It was something that the Arts Council.
Oh, we did it at Hampstead Theatre.
Yeah.
Jen got us booked for the week. We're going to be cabaret, you see. And so we thought we were going to have a performance, you know. And so the music of Martin Ball was supposed to be like a rumba or something. You know? Well, it was a bit like Stranded in the Jungle meets Edmundo Ross. That was the idea. Jen was doing those sort of rhythms. And I, you know, I was dressed as Martin Ballman. Anyway, we managed to do one performance. In fact, I actually got a copy, before the performance we played the jingles, you know. There was the book, 1001 Ways to COUM, which listed all sorts of COUM is nothing, COUM is king, family. Sometimes, you know, it could be quite a profound definition, other times it was nonsense, you know. And we got up to 1984 before, the original idea was to be a billion, not a billion, a million. You know, like, again, that Buddhist thing, like, when you have 1,000,001 names of God. But it was a bit over ambitious because so it was quite interesting how we you know that you know with the book you know I've lost my track now. Oh yes, we had the jingles beforehand were like supermarket jingles. So you know, ding dong, and it'd be one of the lines from 1001 Ways of COUM, you know, like we're pushing the trolley round and it would say something like Kuma, Fab and Kinky. And Jen actually did, and Ken actually recorded a few. We included some of them singing as well as before it came on, you know. So anyway, but the couples, as you say about that performance, of course, they cancelled all the others afterwards. So we failed, and I think that was the sort of, it was always accepted that was the turning point. After that, you sort of turned down a different pathway, and it was more confrontational sort of, well, performance art really, you know, in more sort of, so almost some ways like a Vienna actionist really, with probably an influence there as well. You know. Sorry, I've got into a role there, but you know, it comes in like in a flood. Swept away!
And Jen was friends with Nitch as well. Nitch, and would go to the castle and complain about how boring it was.
Well, there were so many things happening. You remember all the different, you know, keeps coming to your mind. You remember this and that.
Any last questions?
Your productions into submission.
Well, if not, should we call it a day? That's been absolutely wonderful. Really, really, really fantastic. Thank you so much.